Hey everybody, Jen Hatmaker here, your host of the For the Love podcast. Welcome to the show. We're in a series right now called For the Love of Community and Friendships, which is we're really excited to do this particular lift because this is such a common conversation in the community. Particularly, we're gonna really unpack two big ideas today. Number one, making friends here in the middle of life, which, according to the community, is a pretty surprising hardship. Just surprising because I don't know that we expected to still be having to figure out how to make friends in our 40s or 50s or whatever. Or we've moved or life has changed in some way. And so we're going to talk about that and some really powerful approaches to making friends and being a good friend. And so I love the data because this is way less scary than we're telling ourselves in our head. And so more to come on that. And then we're also going to talk a lot about what happens when we have conflict in friendship, right? So either a friendship has some toxic behaviors inside of it, or there's harm being caused, or the other kind of a bit of a loss is when life changes and we feel a friendship drifting. We're going to talk about both of those and what to do. And our guest is so great about saying, here's some potential scripts to use. Here's the approach. And it's so healthy and kind and generous. And one thing that she said today that I really liked is that conflict does not mean we get to check kindness at the door. Just because we are in a moment that is high emotion or hard conversation does not mean that kindness is no longer a part of the equation. She's like, no, we still have to be just as kind as we are when everything's going great. And I just really appreciated that because I think sometimes conflict to us feels aggressive and sometimes even mean-spirited and certainly full of blame. So anyway, more on that to come. And she is so incredible to give us so many useful tools. So we're lucky because we have Dr. Marisa Franco here today to walk us through friendship stuff. Marissa and I met almost exactly a year ago. We were both on a panel at the Aspen Ideas Festival on adult friendships. So I had her on one side and another academic on the other side, both of this is their work, their doctoral work. And then me. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Anyway, she was so smart, so salient, and so warm and generous of spirit. I was like, woo, I want to know more about her. Her work is really important. And so when we knew that we were going to do a MeCourse on friendship, she was my first call. And so Marissa came to my house in Texas and we actually filmed a whole section of that particular MeCourse. So here's why. Dr. Franco is a leading expert in the field of friendship and interpersonal relationships, and her extensive research has made her a sought-after speaker and consultant. She's a TED Talk speaker. She's got a PhD in counseling psychology and just a ton of experience. She's very uniquely positioned to talk about adult friendships, not just from an empirical state, but from research and data. And Marissa is a professor at the University of Maryland. She authored the New York Times bestseller, Platonic: How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. She writes about friendship for, all kinds of incredible publications. Psychology Today, the New York Times, Vice, etc. And so additionally today, she's going to walk us through how our attachment styles play a role in our friendships. It's just everything is so useful. And so whatever brings you to this episode, whether friendship is just a real thriving place and you want to figure out how to keep it so, or whether you're in a season of loneliness or maybe a season of conflict, it's all in here for you. This episode is packed and I think you're going to love it. And I want to say I'm sorry in advance for the lawnmower that started up outside right in the middle of the episode. Well, nothing I could do. So enjoy the sound of grass being cut and definitely enjoy this incredible conversation with the absolutely wonderful Dr. Marisa Franco. Marissa, I'm so happy to see you again. I have just admired your work and respected you so much since we first met last summer in Aspen. Your research is so interesting. So, okay, let's just start here. I've, for my listeners who haven't met you yet, or they're new here, this is their first time to experience you. Um, let's let's just kind of start from a high level place. So, obviously, you've studied the sort of basics, really, of, let's just say, in the broadest terms, because this has a million breakdowns, but what works and doesn't work in the area of friendship, and how those things relate to attachment styles, which is really, it's just a really specific area of study, which I think is something that a lot of us are kind of paying attention to. At least I am, for the first time. So can we just start there? Can you high level some of your findings here and talk to us first about attachment styles and why they matter in the context of friendships?
So attachment styles are like our unconscious set of assumptions for how people are treating us.
Mm.
And when it comes to friendship, so much is ambiguous. Like, why didn't that person text me back? Do they hate me, or are they busy? So a lot of the ways that we interpret our world of friendship is based off our own unconscious baggage, but we don't even realize that we're doing it. So securely attached people, for example, they have had positive, healthy relationships in the past. So they go into relationships assuming that other people are trustworthy, that they will be loved by other people. And what we see in the research is that securely attached people more likely to initiate friendships, better at maintaining friendships, less likely to end them,
Mm.
more comfortable being vulnerable in friendships, showing affection, all of these things that make friendships thrive. Securely attached people are really good at. But
Mm.
then you have anxiously attached people, and they've learned from their past relationships that people will abandon them.
Mm.
And so in friendship, I call them high effort, low reward. They're trying really
Mm.
hard,
Mm.
but things aren't working out. And that's
Yeah.
because we see in the research that, for example, when there's a sign of rejection that's ambiguous, anxiously attached person assumes it's rejection, and then they
Yes.
escalate. They withdraw,
Mm.
they might attack back.
Mm.
Their amygdala, which is the part of their brain associated with stress, it lights up more brightly in response to rejection than people of other attachment styles.
Yeah,
So
so it's
they're
real. Like, this is real. It's not
in the brain.
imagined. Yeah. Yeah. This is a genuine brain response.
Yeah. So they're more
Mm.
preoccupied with their friendships. If something happens in their friendships, they think about it, they ruminate on it.
Mm.
They feel like very afraid that other people are going to abandon them again. So they don't share their needs. They just back away. They might bend to the other person's needs a lot more than they are expressing their own. They're vulnerable to unhealthy friendships because they actually are sometimes attracted to people that make them earn love rather than people that give it freely. Because again, they have the sense that this is what's normal. People are going to pull away from me. And if someone's just giving me love freely, I'm skeptical of it. I don't trust it. That's
Mm.
not what I've experienced before. So then you have avoidantly attached people who also have previous difficult experience in relationships where they've basically experienced neglect. Like
Mm.
people might have been there for them, parents with food, shelter,
Mm.
but emotionally, their parents were like, shut it down, stop having a reaction, stop crying, stop complaining, never getting validated in their emotional experience. So
Mm.
they've learned to suppress their need for connection. And so they're low effort, low reward. They're not trying. Avoidant people initiate less. When we see in the research is that when people are affectionate and loving towards avoidant people, they think, oh, this person just wants something out of me. They don't admit that they need love because that requires the vulnerability of admitting that. And they are allergic to vulnerability. They
Mm.
always want to be seen as having it together, not
Mm.
needing anyone, being self reliant. And so fundamentally in their friendships, they're not investing, they're not intentional about making people feel loved around them because they think people can't be trusted. And if you
Mm.
can't trust people, why invest in them? So they just tend to be more lone wolves or else have a bunch of friendships that are really shallow, like more like party friends, where there's not a lot of vulnerability. They don't feel like people really know them.
Mhm.
And their friends feel like, I don't really know this friend.
It's so interesting. I've heard you talk about this before. And of course, I cannot help it. I'm always sitting here self identifying. when you are teaching about this. Is it do you see with adults who go through a profound like sea change in their life? Okay, why am I acting like I'm not talking about myself? I feel like I used to be pretty securely attached. Um, just in general, I grew up securely attached, and so it just never occurred to me not to be. And I always assumed essentially positive intent everywhere, and to a fault, probably like to the detriment of red flags. Um, but after my divorce, which was not mutual, I noticed that really for the first time in my life, I have some anxious attachment behaviors um, that are new to me. I keep going, why am I telling myself a story like this in my head? Like, why am I like catastrophizing or fixating or like what you said at the very beginning, assuming rejection, like any little glitch in the matrix. I'm like, well, that's unintentional. That's an intentional thing. It's a whole thing there. Do you see adults possibly changing their attachment style, or is it baked into the sauce more or less?
No, it changes. It definitely changes
Uh-huh.
over time. Um, Without a major issue happening, we actually tend to get more secure over time in
Yeah,
the research. But
yeah.
certainly, like a major trauma can disrupt our attachment styles. And that's to say, I believe we are all of the attachment styles,
Hmm.
and that different relationships
Oh,
can bring some to the
that's good.
surface. And that, yeah, and that we also have a global
Yeah,
attachment style, which means that that's the one that kind of tends to surface. But I don't think it's just so categorical and compartmentalized. It's kind of like
yeah.
different situations can bring out different things, different people can bring out different life
It's a good
experiences
point.
can bring out different things. And so I think, yeah, a lot of people could probably identify with that as well.
I think the other good thing I just heard you say is that we do tend to get more secure the older we get, the longer we live, which is great news. Like we're not stuck in one of these sort of dysfunctional attachment spaces. We can learn here, right? We can get better. We can become more healthy in our relationships. That's if this isn't fixed.
Exactly. I think
Yeah,
that's just a really important message because people are like, well, Marissa, why are you telling me about this attachment? It's just I'm doomed and I'm
yeah,
doomed to dysfunctional relationships. And for me, the power of attachment styles, why I really love the theory is like, if you don't understand your attachment style, you think that the world is just mean and cruel and people are going to reject you or people are going to betray you if you're
yeah,
more avoidant, and you don't have any power, you don't have any agency because
yeah.
all the issues are out in the world. But when you understand attachment theory, you see, oh, because I have this assumption about the world, it leads me to engage in certain behaviors that are
Mm,
making that assumption more likely to become true, right? So
yeah.
avoidant people,
Mm,
whenever someone expresses love, they think this is because they want something out of me. They don't actually receive it. Eventually, people stop expressing love. It's not
I
because people
see.
don't love you, but
Hmm.
it's because your ideas are affecting your behavior. Or anxious people thinking everyone is going to reject them
Hmm.
and kind of pulling away and disengaging when something happens in a relationship, like they don't hear back from a friend and then they escalate and they take longer to not respond. And then, there ends up being a rejection that happens because of that escalation. So I think if we can understand our attachment styles, we just have more agency. We have more
That's good.
control. We can shift our behaviors and we can find the relationships that we really want.
Hmm. This is great. In a second, we're really going to drill into the crux of this particular conversation, which is navigating conflict inside friendships, particularly. But because I have you here and this is your area, and I've got a couple of other just big, high level friendship questions that we get from the community. Because while you're here, I'm just going to squeeze all the juice out of the lime. Um, and so this is an interesting conversation that people are having in the community, which is the sense of um, almost diversity in your friendship. That you kind of hear opposites attract, and we generally apply that to a relation or a romantic relationship. But I'm curious your thought on how that affects friendships. Like, and maybe it doesn't, but is there a role that similarity or compatibility play in like forming and certainly sustaining friendships? Is there a reason we're drawn to people who are super similar? Is there good reason to reach beyond those boundaries as well?
Yeah. So friends that are similar and different give us different things. So when we are in our young 20s, we tend to make a lot of friends. And the reason is at that point, we're really looking to expand our sense of identity. And people do that for us.
Mm,
You expose me to new experiences. I never thought I would have played soccer, but here I am. I never thought I would have gone dragon boat sailing, but here I am. Um, and so, meeting different kinds of people, engaging different types of relationships, they kind of expand our sense of our identity, expose us to new things, which we really desire, especially around, in our 20s and our teenage
mm,
years. And so, but there could also be periods of time, right, where you're looking for novelty, you're looking for adventure, you're looking for difference in a perspective, you're looking for that challenge. And so you tend to want to have friends that are different from you. I also think it's important to have friends that are different from you for like equity issues. Like, I think one
yeah.
of the ways that people come to understand the tribulations of other people that have marginalized identity is through personal relationships, like more
Mm,
so than, you know, hearing debates online. It's like hearing your
certainly.
friend go through really difficult experience because they're Black or because they're gay. Like, that's what
Yeah.
really pulls people in. And so I think just like from the perspective of like how we heal as a society,
Mm,
I think connection across difference is important.
yeah.
That being said, what we see in the research is that people are a lot more likely to be friends with people that are similar to them.
Yeah.
It's called homophily. And so, and the value of these similar relationships is they do make us feel very safe. So when you're going through a really difficult time, for example, it's nice to just have those friends that understand, that get you.
Mm,
We have different needs. When you shift out of that difficult time and you're feeling more stable, then you might be more open to the friends that are different from you, are going to challenge you and push you. So it also depends on like what's going on in your life right now. What kind of support do you need? Are you looking for novelty because you feel stagnant? Or are
mm,
you looking for safety and security because you've gone through some difficult times?
mm. Kind of springboarding sideways off of that. I'm interested in your take on friendships happening organically. If I hear one consistent pain point inside my community, it is the surprising reality of friendships being difficult here in the middle of life. You just kind of think this is a young person's prob. Like this is when you're young and you're impulsive and you don't know how to be. I don't know. It just feels like friendship gets a lot of play in the younger years, and particularly
Yeah.
teen, adolescent, even young adulthood. But it's surprising to a lot of women here, like in our 40s, going, well, damn. I, I thought that by the time you're this age, your friendships are locked and loaded, like you're kind of over that hump, and yet a very common experience is loneliness, for a million reasons, um, later than we expected. And so I'd like to hear, first of all, your response to that. Like that would be like anecdotal finding just inside the community, like, whoa, we're weirdly lonely, and it is not rare. So that specifically, but then this idea of making friends at now now when like life is just bananas and the kids, it's the whole thing. And so should we be expecting that to just happen, or
Mm,
what does that look like to apply intentionality to new friendships when you're like 40 damn five?
yeah.
I just
I
threw a lot
see.
at you. Pick,
Yeah, I'll
pick
try to
and
break it
go.
down a
Yes.
little. Okay, so I hear that there can be this assumption that everyone has their friends and, I should have had my friends already. And to be honest, it's a lot more typical for people to be lonely than it is for them to be complete
Okay.
in their group of friends. I mean,
Mm,
the rates of loneliness are anywhere from 20 to 50% based on the study. So
Wow.
that's very high. Likely, whoever you ask to hang out with will be really happy that you did, more so than they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I already have my group of friends, so I'm not open right now.
Hmm.
Um, and I see this idea that friendship happening organically as just a saboteur of friendship. That,
Hmm.
we see in the research that people that see friendship as happening without effort are more likely to be lonely 5 years later. People that see it as requiring effort are less likely to be lonely 5 years later. So you're going to have to try. It's not just going to happen for you. I think as, for people in their 40s, one benefit that you might have more than younger people is that you have more life. And so there are people that you can look back to in your past who you're like, I wish I never fell out of touch with them. I wish that we continue to be friends and stay close. And what we see in the research is that when people try to reconnect with someone, that person is happier to receive that reconnection than we predict. So
Hmm.
I hear people say things like, oh, they moved on with their life. They don't care
Hmm.
about me anymore. Right. But we see in the research that actually people are a lot happier to be reconnected with than we might predict. So I would say start there. Like,
Hmm. That's good.
you could scroll through your social media, your phone. Who were you talking to these last couple of years that you wish you were still talking to? And just be like, hey, I was just thinking about you. How's it going? And if they're responsive, like, oh, would love to reconnect. Like, would you be open to meeting up sometime? I always talk about the importance of joining something repeated over time. Like if you have no friends right now and you want to make friends, I would say, what's something that you enjoy? It could be a walking group, it could be art
Hmm.
class, it could be a
Yeah.
language class. And how can you join a community around that thing? Because when an interaction is repeated, we benefit from something called the mere exposure effect, which is our unconscious tendency to like who is familiar to us. So,
Yeah.
there is this study where people were planted into a psychology lecture. At the end of the semester, nobody remembered any of those women that were planted into the lecture, but they liked the woman that showed up for the most lectures 20% more than the woman that didn't show up for any. So
Interesting.
if we can just, yeah, it's fascinating. So
Yeah.
if you could just find something that's repeated over time, people are going to like you more. You're going to like them. And then at
Yeah.
some point, just say, like, oh, I really enjoyed getting to know you. Would you be open to getting tea
Yeah.
before our next class or after our
Yeah.
next class? That's the other thing that I see that people struggle with. Sometimes they're like, I want to make friends. They join a community. They just wait for people to come to them. They're engaging in something called covert avoidance, which is our tendency to show up physically, but check out mentally. We don't
Hmm.
engage with people. We're on our phone. We talk to the one person we already know. We're in the corner. We just seem disinterested. You
Yeah.
have to overcome covert avoidance by saying, oh, hey, like, I really enjoyed our last class. What did you think about it? Like, you actually have to introduce yourself to people. You can't just show up.
Hmm. It's so funny how this idea that a connection is just going to happen to us magically is embedded and without any effort on our part. So it really is true that for kind of a minimal amount of effort, you can create connection. Like that's
Yeah.
not that big of a deal. What you just
It's not
said,
hard.
that's not hard, it's not time consuming, like that's not over the top.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember hearing you talk about this before. It's helpful to remember, like you just said, most people are craving connection. It's just
Yeah.
that's a great baseline to start from. Like, I think this idea of going, nobody is craving connection is just a silly place to start because it's simply not true. Like,
No.
it's helpful. It's bolstering to
Yeah.
imagine like at least 50% of the people in here would love a coffee date. It's pretty good
Yeah.
odds. Um, Summertime and even the start of the school year, you guys can mean a season of spending, right? Like vacays and staycays, splurges, parties, celebrations, and then, of course, all the back to school stuff. But are you spending the right way or the responsible way? I know it's boring, but important. So maybe check out Chime. They have an online checking account, tons of benefits, millions of members love them. Like fee-free overdraft up to $200 plus, you guys. You can get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit and manage your money on the go, like all the time, 24/7. With Chime, you also have access to more than 60,000 fee-free ATMs. That's more than the top 3 national banks combined. You can also pay family and friends super easily through Chime, no matter what bank account they use. And you can cash out your money fee free. It all basically means more time and money for whatever floats your boat. And of course, with Chime, there are no monthly fees, no minimum balance, no deposit required to become a member. So sign up for Chime today and keep making this summer the best one yet for yourself and certainly for your wallet. Get started at chime.com/forthelove. You guys, that's chime.com/forthelove. Chime is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services and debt card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. Eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Access to direct deposits up to 2 days early depends on the timing of the submission of the payment file from the payer. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply. A fun thing for me that I've told you about before is that my 3 a.m. nighttime brain wants to wake up and think about, well, like health insurance premiums that are due and my children's future and the state of all of our cars and what I said that one time to that one person. But also a fun thing for me now is that 3 a.m. brain is no longer invited to the party because of one thing: Focal CBD sleep gummies. They have changed my sleep game entirely. First of all, they work in that they have solved my middle of the night problems, but they're also yummy, like healthy sleep candy. I don't know what kind of magic makes them so effective because I'm not a scientist, but there's no weirdness in these. There's nothing bad. It's only good stuff only. Okay. So maybe you are a champion sleeper. If so, congratulations. And you just need a little focus during the day. Guess what? Focal has daytime gummies too. So I've got a code for you. If you want to change your brain game, For the Love is your code to get 20% off at focal.com. But really, sleep is priceless. So you can thank me later. So that's Focal, FOCL.com. And your code is For the Love for 20% off. Okay, I really want to drill into the heart of today's conversation because we're talking about conflict in friendship, which is a universally detested situation. I can't find anybody who enjoys this, who feels great about this, who is even that good at it. We expect to have conflict in our marriages. We expect to have them with our kids, our parents and siblings. Like those really, really, those come with a lot of instruction on what to do when you get sideways. There's less instruction on what to do when you get sideways with a friend. It's like, well, I don't know why. I don't know why that's a black hole of conversation, but it's not uncommon. Of course it happens. And so there's a major deterrent for most people to address an issue with a friend, which is interesting because we're not afraid to address it with a kid or a spouse, but with a friend, something is wrong, something is pulling apart, something is hurting, whatever it is. And the hurdle of simply bringing it up, it can consume years. Literally, people could lose years of having this inside story going on in their head that they never say out loud. So let's start at the beginning stage if we can and kind of work our way through a little bit. But let's say someone's listening and they've got a real conflict with a friend, and maybe that friend has no idea. Whatever it is. Can you talk about the initial healthiest steps, the best way to begin to engage dialogue, to either preserve or redeem or sort out this friendship to see if it's worth keeping?
Yeah. The first step is really with yourself. Being able to reflect on how you're feeling, understand what the issue is, self-soothe, like soothe your emotions so that you can go into this conversation trying to understand the other person and share your side. So you want to go in with the sense of mutuality, which means I'm invested in getting both of our needs met, not just mine. I'm not going in trying to win. Because if I'm winning, my friend is losing, right? And that's going to be harmful to the relationship. So am I in a place where I'm not going to be reactive in this conversation? Am I in a place where I'm going to share my needs, but also try to understand their needs? Am I in a place where I'm looking at this as a way to repair our
Mm.
relationship and reconcile our relationship rather than just attack? So that might require you writing stuff down. It might require you
Mm.
venting to someone else. It might require you talking to your therapist about it so that you're in the right place for repair. I don't recommend having reactive conflict when you're very angry because
Yeah.
we're not able to perspective take, which is key to healthy conflict.
Mm.
um, when you're approaching this friend, starting with framing, which is the first thing that you say, should be something that indicates that you're addressing this conflict as an act of love. Like, hey,
Mm.
friend, you're so important to me. I really value our friendship. I don't want anything to get between us. And there's been something on my
Yeah.
mind, so I knew that I had to bring it up so that that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So starting with that framing, can we chat about it at some point? And then I like to text the frame and then invite in person
Okay.
conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Um,
do you like that because it gives that other person a minute to receive that and process that before they have to like be locked into a pretty intense conversation?
yeah, I like that because I don't want to bring up conflict if someone's unprepared because
Yeah.
then they might be more likely to be
Defensive.
reactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they get their self-soothing time too, right?
Sure. That's good.
Um, and so when we meet up, making sure that you're saying like, this is my reality. This is how I feel.
Yeah.
When you're late, I feel less loved.
Mm.
I feel hurt, and so you're not attacking the other person. You're not saying you're a bad friend, you're lazy, you're not thoughtful, you're not
Mm.
responsive. You get so angry all the time, right? There's this way that us healing ourselves, getting our needs met in the friendship is going to help our friend too. So
Mm.
we want to be able to acknowledge that. So I have a friend, she's a talker. She's a talker. I'm thinking, how do I address this? Because I'm getting so tired and so drained. And we're on a vacation together. So I'm like, I really
Yeah.
do need to address this. So I'm able to realize that by me being disengaged, that's also impacting her because she's not being
Yeah.
listened to as well. So
Yeah.
I address it by saying, hey, like, I realize I'm not always the best listener in our friendship. I
Mm.
want to be a better listener. Here's what I might need for that. Like I might need
That's
one
good.
story at a time. I might need some volley back and forth.
That's good. Well,
So
that's
so
wise.
making yeah, yeah, just saying like, hey, like I want to be able to be close to you, or I want to be able to be really vulnerable with you so that we can be
Mm.
closer. And what I need from that is like when I share, like don't give instead of advice, I'd rather validation or something like that. So that's the framing piece that's really important.
Mm.
The I feel statements. And then the perspective taking, which is like, hey, what were you meaning when you said that? Or what was going on
Yeah.
with you? What's going on in your life that might be contributing? Is there something that I'm missing here? And so
Mm.
hearing what their experience is and coming together and being like, okay, we're a team here.
Mm.
Here's your needs. Here's my needs, right? Maybe you're neurodiverse, you have ADHD, like time is really hard for you, but time's also important for me. So as a team, how do we get both of our needs met, right?
That's
Maybe
good.
what if I tell you to show up a half hour earlier than what's intended? Like what's something that's going to work for
Mm.
both of us rather than something that's going to work for me at your expense or work for you at my expense?
Mm. That's so disarming to come in like that. Generally, most people have really polished up their list of offenses, like really shined it up. Like I can, let me bullet point all the ways that, so coming at it from that approach is inviting and less like threatening. What um, would you say there are some general um, behaviors or responses that sometimes mean a friendship is not necessarily redeemable? Like,
Mm.
are there places where a friendship is just not a safe place?
Yeah, that is a good question. Um, I'll talk about some responses that could be really harmful when you're working through conflict. Because remember,
Yeah.
you have to be kind to friends all the time. not just
Mm.
in conflict too, right? Like if you're unkind to
Mm.
friends, it's going to hurt the friendship. And, you know, I don't, sometimes, somehow people think like, when I have conflict, I can be unkind because conflict is inherently unkind. No, you have to hold yourself to those same standards
That's good.
of conflict and kindness. So, one thing that I see that really harms friendships during conflict is blame, right? So
Yeah.
someone says, "I wish you didn't miss my birthday," and you said, "Well, you did this, 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 and this. Here's all
Yeah.
the things that you've done that made me act like that." You
Yeah.
push it, you put it back on them. For me, in healthy conflict, I think of what does this conflict look like without blame? Like, what if I
Mm.
go into here not trying to blame this person, not trying to even assume that they were trying to intentionally hurt me? And so then how do I navigate it with that
Mm.
being what's going on in my head? And then there's different behaviors. These are the Gottman's couples therapists. So they've
Mm.
researched conflict a lot more intensively than we see in friends. And they find that there's certain behaviors that really predict divorce. And I think we can say also don't use this in friendship, which
Mm.
are stonewalling, which means you just shut down,
Yeah.
which are defensiveness, which means they tell you there's an issue and you respond, well, actually, it's not a big issue. You're being too sensitive, or this is the issue that I have with you, which is contempt, where you literally just like put them down or you roll your eyes at them, and which is like criticism, which is you tell them something. It's kind of like a lighter version of contempt, where you tell them something about themselves, like, you're not a great friend, you're not as thoughtful,
Mm.
you're not loving towards me.
Yeah.
Or even when you say you always do this, because that indicates something about their character, right? So trying to avoid saying you always do this, for example. So those are
Mm.
the kind of things we want to avoid. We want to avoid blame. We want to avoid criticism. We want to avoid contempt. We want to avoid defensiveness. We want to avoid stonewalling.
Mm.
But here's the complicated part of conflict in friendship. Sometimes when we get into a conflict and a friend is reactive, we think to ourselves, that's who they are. This is the
Mm.
real them. I finally got to know the real them. Like they've just, the person I knew before was not the real them. This conflict
Mm.
person is the real them. But conflict actually tends to bring out our most triggered selves. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's our realest self, right? And so
Mm.
even if a conflict goes bad and it was difficult, being able to reflect on, is this conflict, this issue we've had with conflict, is it a sign of a larger pattern of unhealthiness in this friendship where this friend is not considering me and is, more self-absorbed? Or
Mm.
is this something where I'm seeing a very triggered part of them that's coming out in their friendship and they're otherwise kind and otherwise loving? So I
Mm.
think we also want to keep the bigger picture in mind, which can be really difficult when conflict goes wrong.
That's so good. And all I really have to do is reverse that and apply it to myself to know what you're saying is true. That my conflict self is my triggered self generally. And I'm overstimulated and I'm a little panicked and I'm I'm anxious about the conflict. And so you're right. That's not how we judge someone's like whole life character. And that's good to remember if we just simply reverse it. I want to there's a brand of conflict that is confusing for a lot of adults because we get a sense that we're doing something wrong or we're not doing it right or um and that is when a friendship begins to shift or loosen its bonds via change. So whatever that is, a change of a stage of life change, obviously distance and a move eventually wreaks some havoc generally on the strength of a connection. A change in relationship status, whatever it is, our life has some sort of shift and we feel it in a friendship and even start to distance from that. So that is always a confusing change because we didn't necessarily hit a conflict. Like we didn't necessarily have an argument or no one harmed the other one in any way in any way, but yet it feels like it's just drifting away from us a little bit. And so can you talk about just that phenomenon first of all, and if we are supposed to expect our friends to hang on with us through all the various life changes. And then on the flip side, what do we do when our friend is the one who had a change and we feel them and we're like, where are you going? Um, what do we do? What do we do with that kind of conflict, which is so largely internal?
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
I was on this podcast. This guy was like, I think he was like in his late 60s, and he never had kids. So he was talking about how he went through this period where his friends had kids and he saw them less. And he was like, well, if you wait it out though, they come back. And now they are retired or their kids had moved on to college and stuff. And he was close to those friends again. And so yeah, sometimes we have this assumption of linearity when it comes to friendship, like we're just going to get closer and closer and closer
Mm,
and closer. And it threatens us when that assumption of linearity is violated. But in
yeah.
fact, the ebb and flow is what's normal, right? Like life is ebb
Mm,
and flow. It's nature
yeah.
to ebb and flow. It's nature to have seasons in friendship. And we see that the friends that persist are the ones where we assume that there's ebb and flow that's part of the friendship. Because the people that assume linearity, when there's an issue, when you're talking less than you used to, for example, you take it as a sign of rejection. And when we think we're rejected, we tend to reject back and you just kind of
Mm,
escalate it, right? Instead of assuming, oh, I know this is a busy time in their life and that, I trust that at some point we'll like reconnect again, or at some
mm,
point it'll get a little bit easier for us. I believe in mutuality, which means, again, I'm thinking about my friend's needs and my needs at the same time. And when I look at both of our needs, whose are the biggest priority, right? So with my friends who have tiny children, I'm like, I can give them more grace and be more
mm,
flexible, because I have the capacity to be flexible. Now, if there's other things going on in my life, like let's say I'm caretaking for an elderly parent, I might really need them to show up. At that
mm,
point, with mutuality in place, I still might try to ask them to show up for me more. So
yeah.
it really is about us thinking about both of us and what can be provided if we think about both of us as a unit. The other thing is, though, that like in order to give friends grace as they are going through different life stages, as they might not be able to show up for us in the ways that we has happened in the past, we need to make sure we're getting our needs met elsewhere, right?
Mm,
Because if this is the only friend who's my confidant, the only friend I can
mm,
be vulnerable with,
yeah.
suddenly they can't call me every day, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to give them that grace because my need is now going unmet. And
Mm,
so the capacity to give
yeah.
grace is based on our ability to make sure we have multiple places where we're getting our needs met. So I can say, hey, we can't talk every day like we used to. You're not the person that I can necessarily just call at the drop of the hat when I need to talk to someone. But I do have other people that provide that need. So I'm understanding in this period of time that you can't give that to me. So,
Mm,
I think empathy comes from the privilege of having some other needs met. So we can also just like take care of ourselves outside of the friendship and make sure we're having a larger community so we can give our friends grace when life stages disrupt our ability to have the closeness that we used to.
I have just the thing for you. Jen Hatmaker Book Club. We are going on our 4th year of clubbing, and it is just one of my favorite things. We read the best books every month, thought-provoking, entertaining, fun, important, meaningful. I always love it when our members say they would never have discovered or read a book were it not for book club. But the real party is in our private Facebook community. People have made lifelong friends there, finding connections with other women literally right in their neighborhood and getting together with all of our local chapters. So when you're a member, you get so much fun stuff every month too. Of course, you get the book box with the book and a special gift and a love note from me. But you also get a whole bunch of digital resources like discussion guides, custom content, music playlists from our authors. That's one of our favorite things. I also host video podcasts with our authors from each month, as well as Facebook Live chats where you have a chance to get on Zoom with me for our month book talk. And you get special access to events, meetups. It's so fun. We are your people. Come join us. Use the code READ, READ, for $5 off your first month at jenhatmakerbookclub.com. Let's say someone has a conflict with a friend and they've kind of done this work that you've outlined and they've approached it in a way that it's got dignity baked into it and it's mutual and it the hope was reconciliation and um and it's simply not working,
Mm.
and it's not received, or it didn't have the effect. Let's say you were saying, this thing is hurting me, and I how can we work our way through it, and that behavior doesn't change at all.
Yeah.
And so can you, I mean, I hate to be so on the nose, but give us something of either an internal or a verbal script for when the efforts have been kind of exhausted, and
Mm.
a friendship is no longer a really healthy part of your life. What do you do?
Mm. Mm. That's a
That
good
script is
question.
really nerve-wracking for most of us.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Um, it is really hard. And I think some people prefer to ghost or back away. And I
Yeah.
think if the friend is not invested in you anymore and it's kind of mutual, then that's okay.
uh,
But I think when the friend is clearly still reaching out and trying to hang out with you and you're not invested, it's way kinder to tell them,
yeah.
because when we don't have closure, it triggers something called ambiguous loss, which means, basically we don't understand why it ended. So we keep focusing on it. And it's like
Mm,
you're escaping the pain of having to have that conversation. But in response, that friend is now having twice as much pain and
yeah.
rumination and trying to figure out,
Right.
like, it's an act of kindness to be more direct, even if it feels very scary.
Yeah.
And so, I think similar to some of the skills we have during conflict, which are like focusing on you
Mm,
and, the effect on you,
yes.
um, and doing something called a commemorative friendship, which means acknowledging that there still were beautiful moments in the friendship, and just kind of saying, going forward, like, I don't think we're compatible anymore, but I really appreciate this, this, and this. So I guess that would look something like,
Mm,
hey friend, like, I know we've been working on this issue. It's been really hard, I think, for us um to work through this. And I'm
mm,
currently feeling like I'm getting stressed within our friendship, or I'm feeling like this incompatibility might be too much for me to be able to like work through here.
mm,
Or whatever the issue is, or I'm just really not feeling like as validated as I want to. And I know that, you've been working on this, but we're just not getting there. Or
yeah.
I'm just, whatever the need is that's not being met. And
Yeah.
so, I just wanted to share and be transparent with you that I don't think this is working for me. That's not to say that I don't also acknowledge all the beautiful moments that we did have, the ways that you showed up for me at this time, the ways that I've really grown and learned towards you. So I wanted to make sure that I was telling you that, this has been a really meaningful relationship for me, even though
Mm,
it's not going to work for me any longer.
mm. Again, you still are preserving kindness. I like what you said earlier. We don't get to check kindness at the door just because conflict is in the room.
Exactly.
That's not how it works. Even in a bit of a friendship breakup, still kindness is
Yeah.
required and helpful and the right thing to do.
And the other thing that I think is really important is you hear me embrace ambivalence, which I think ambivalence we typically think of as something negative. But in
Mm,
times of conflict, we tend to see things as all negative, and we don't see the ambivalence of there's positivity and there's negativity in this friendship. So if we're
mm,
able to embrace ambivalence, we could say, hey, friend, we don't hang out as much as I would like, but you also make me feel really loved when we do hang out.
mm,
We can embrace that there's difficulty and there's also beauty at the same time. Whatever, we just want to make sure that like it's not me versus you, right? It's
mm,
here, it's us. And
mm.
even internally, it's not me versus you. It's like a part of me that's struggling, but another part of me that really appreciates you. And I can give voice to both of those parts.
Thinking again of the woman listening who's like, um, a little lonely in her life. And I'm going back to the earlier conversation. You talked about, what the research says about essentially how people actually perceive you and think of you when they meet
Yeah.
you.
Yes. I've seen across the board in every aspect of human connection that when we predict how we're coming off, it's more negative than the truth.
Yeah.
We see this when we first meet people, when strangers interact, they underestimate how liked they are by the other person. That's called the
Yeah.
liking gap. We
That's
see
right.
this when we're vulnerable with someone. We tend to think that people are judging us more than they actually are, and we underestimate how authentically they're perceiving us. That's called the beautiful mess effect. We see this on reconnecting with people. When we reconnect, we underestimate just how much people value it. We see this in affection when we predict how our affection comes off. We think it comes off more awkward than it does and underestimates just how much people value it. We see it with random acts of kindness, that when people are asked to like give someone a hot chocolate, they underestimate just how much people will value that act of kindness. And so across the board, I think while we are built for connection, we are built for protection in a way that's stronger. And social death feels like a form of death. And so when our brain is like, should I protect myself or should I connect with the other person? Often that desire to self-protect comes first. And these two things could be so much opposites, right? All the things I do to protect myself, I don't reach out. I withdraw, I back away. I don't share affection. I'm not thoughtful, right? All those things feel like they're protecting me. They're not making me more vulnerable, but they're harming my relationships. The things that we do to protect our relationships require us to be inherently more vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, I'm being vulnerable with you. I'm reaching out to you. I'm telling you how much I love and value. I'm trying to work through this conflict with you. And if we avoid risk, then we're taking the biggest risk of all, which is that we're in this deep place of self-protection, but completely isolated.
Yeah. Let's land the plane here on some good news. What if you discovered in your research and in your life, because you have a deep, beautiful well of like friendships too. So you're also a person, in addition to being a doctor. What are some of the most lovely and best and most effective ways that you see that folks can attract the kind of friends that they're hoping for in their life? I mean, even in our 40s, 50s, and beyond. What are the things that make us a good friend? Because again, that's where we can start, is with ourselves, and work on becoming a good friend and having like attractive, really like literally attractive behaviors toward the kind of people we want in our life. What do you see those as being?
So there's this thing oh gosh, I'm going to get into the research. You're like, take off your
Do
research
it.
hat,
No,
be
no,
a
no,
person.
do it.
I'm
Do
like,
it.
here's the research.
Give us the data.
Okay.
The analytics suggest.
The analytics, and then I'll try to provide some real world examples. But this thing I like to call like diagnostic moments, which are these moments wherein people tend to look to what happens in those moments to diagnose the friendship overall. And those moments are when we are at our lowest and when we are at our highest. How do people respond in those moments? So when I'm sick, when I got COVID, when my cat died, when I go through this breakup, right? How are my friends responding? That is the time, if you are able to be intentional about showing up for your friends. I'm talking about checking in emotionally. I'm talking about providing instrumental support, which means something physical and material. Like I'm going to buy you food. I'm going to give you a self-care package. I'm going to send you money for coffee. I think you shared that, Jen, when it came to your friend. Intentional at those moments, that is really going to be remembered as the face of the friendship. But also, there was a study that found that how people show up for us when we're in our high moments predicts how satisfied we are in the relationship, even more than in the low moments.
Interesting.
So when I got my promotion, when it's my birthday, when I, started my own business, when I had a kid that I wanted to have for a while, when I, got into this new relationship, are you excited for me? Are you celebrating? Do I see my joy reflected in your eyes? Are you like, let me take you out because I'm so proud of you. Let me get you a dinner. Let me send you some roses. Let me send you a bouquet. Like all of those moments are so, so important. And that's to say, right, that we don't have time. We're so busy. It's so hard. But if you show up in those moments where it really, really matters, the highs and the lows, even if you can't show up all the time, that's going to mean so much for the friends in your life.
I love that. That is not complicated. And those gestures do not have to be super expensive, or they're small but so meaningful. I mean, I'm doing a little mental catalog in my own life of my friends who have done that for me over and over and over, both high and low. And that those are the moments I think I feel the most loved. And so we all can do that. Like that's within our range. It's within our power to be a good friend. And thus we have good friends. And so I love your work because it's always so hopeful, and it is so helpful. And I appreciate your both academic approach to friendship as well as like the gentle touch of it all. Just knowing adults are wonky, and friendship makes us weird sometimes. And it's the source of a lot of joy and a lot of anxiety both. And so, um, can you, before I let you go here, can you tell my community, because I mean, we've barely even started. There is That's the tip of the iceberg. Under the water is another mountain here of stuff that you have researched and written about. Can you talk about where they can find your work and follow you and all of that good stuff?
Absolutely. And thanks so much for having me, Jen. So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Marissa G. Franco. That's DrMarisa On my website, drmarissagfranco.com. You can take a quiz that assesses your strengths and weaknesses as a friend, give you some suggestions, or reach out for speaking engagements on how to make friends or how to find belonging at work. And for more, you can read my book, Platonic: How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends.
Are you working on something new right now?
I
What
am.
is
I don't
it?
know how much I should disclose, but
Okay.
I saw this issue while I was studying friendship that basically, if you don't feel worthy, you tend to be more attracted to people that see you more negatively. Because when people see you
Oh,
positively, you're like, oh, I feel like an imposter. They're going to find out how, crummy I really am. So it's very threatening to be in positive
wow.
relationships if you feel really bad about yourself. So I want my next book to be about what's the work we can do on ourselves to have the capacity to engage in these healthy,
Whoa.
meaningful relationships.
Mm, mm, Are you already deep in the bag on that?
I'm like really in the research. You know me, the
Yeah. Yeah.
research,
Yeah.
the research is, yeah, I'm just like reading all the research, all the science of it right now.
Well, I love that because in so many ways, this is very lightly explored. This is a lot of new frontier and new territory. And um, I can't wait to see what you uncover and how you sort of alchemize that research into like life and what it looks like in a real life. You do that so well. That's not easy. I mean, so many leaders in your field can either be very largely academic or very largely either by book or by touch.
Yep.
And somehow you manage to do both, which is a rare gift and really
Thank you.
special. And I love that this is your area of focus. And I cannot wait to read everything you write. So cheering you on big over here. Okay, last question. You've answered this before, but um, everybody gets this. And you can answer this however you want, Marissa. Like, this could be dumb as a sack of bricks, or it could be like so meaningful and poignant. Like, I like it all. What is saving your life right now?
I'm gonna go for the I don't want to say dumb because it's not dumb to me. I I was just in Mexico for a month on my
Yeah.
platonic getaway with all of my friends, and there's these items that I really miss because I feel like they make me feel like who I am, like LaCroix seltzer. And honestly, a big one is like popcorn. I literally have a popcorn right here. Every
Oh,
time I have therapy after I have popcorn for myself because it
you
makes me,
do?
yeah, I have therapy popcorn. It really helps me feel so soothed. I don't know what it is about popcorn. It's just
Uh-huh.
like the perfect snack for me. It's always there
Yeah.
for me. Like I feel like I don't know. It's like it's if I had a secure attachment snack, it would be popcorn. So
Listen, if you want, you are talking to the wrong girl if you want me to say a snack answer is dumb. Like, I'm like, here, here, co-sign. Snacks are life, man. Popcorn, you have it right next to you. It's so perfect. I love it. Thank you yet again for coming on and for being here and for just your generosity toward my community and toward me. It just means so much to me. And so, um, great to see you. Until next time, when you're ready to talk about what our self worth means to our friendships. Here, give me a call.
Sounds good.
Let's run it on the show. Thank you. Okay, guys, as promised, so much more. We just barely started this conversation. So if you go to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, not only will I have this entire episode and all the show notes, but I will have all those links to Marissa's work and her spaces and her websites and her socials, her books, everything. There's so much to learn here. And I'm so grateful for all she has brought to bear on my community. She's so generous with her time and her incredible knowledge and experience. And every time she's like, well, there's a theory that, I'm like, oh, I can't get enough of it. I just love it. I love all her data-based information. So more to come in this series, you guys. We're hoping to just fill your little toolkit with so many resources on keeping and maintaining the most thriving, healthy adult friendships. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.